This is what 160 feet of missing water looks like. That white ring on the rock, that's where the water used to be. That's 22 years of drought, carved into stone, visible from space. Right now, 63% of the continental United States is in drought. Not inconvenient drought, not the kind where you skip watering your lawn, the kind where cities are issuing disaster declarations. The kind where a major American city is, for the first time in modern history, on a countdown clock to running out of water entirely. And when people can't drink, they leave. And when they leave, they stop paying their mortgages. And when they stop paying their mortgages, the banks feel it next. Let's talk about scale, because the numbers are the kind that don't feel real until you say them slowly. As of this month, more than half the continental United States is in some stage of drought. That's not a statistic from a climate change pamphlet. That's the federal government's own drought monitor, updated weekly. And it went from 36% to 60% in less than 4 months, the fastest expansion on record. But here's what makes 2026 different from every other bad drought year. It's not one region. It's not the West having a bad winter. This time, the crisis split in 2 directions at once, and both of them are pointed directly at the housing market. Direction 1, the West, which has been drying out slowly for over 2 decades. Direction 2, the Southeast, which was never supposed to have this problem at all. Start in the West, because that's where the slow-motion catastrophe has been building the longest. The Colorado River is the water supply for 40 million people across 7 states: Arizona, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, California, New Mexico, Wyoming. It feeds their taps, irrigates their farms, and powers their electricity through hydroelectric dams. And right now, the 2 reservoirs that hold that water, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, are at 32% and 24% full, respectively. In Utah, the governor declared a statewide drought emergency this spring after snowpack peaked at just 20% of normal, with all 29 counties in severe drought. In Colorado, the governor followed in June. Federal forecasters are now warning that Lake Powell could fall below the minimum level needed to generate hydroelectric power as early as August of this year. No hydropower means rolling pressure on the electrical grid, which means heat that can't be cooled. In Phoenix, in the summer. Let that image sit for a moment. Now go east, because this is the part the national media hasn't fully caught up to yet. The Southeast is supposed to be wet. It rains there, that's the deal. Except this year, 100% of North Carolina is in drought, 99% of Florida, 99% of South Carolina, 98% of Georgia, Tennessee, Virginia, Alabama, every single state in the region. Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina just experienced their driest 9-month stretch since 1895. The Floridan Aquifer, which supplies drinking water to millions of people across the state, just hit its lowest level since 2011. NASA satellites confirmed it from orbit. Over 120,000 acres have burned in Florida this year alone. The Everglades, which are supposed to be a swamp, are on fire. If the drought is the disease, there are 3 things making it terminal, and only one of them is the weather. Accelerant 1. Artificial intelligence. Every time you use an AI chatbot, every query, every image, every answer, a data center somewhere consumes electricity, and electricity generates heat, and heat requires cooling, and cooling, in most facilities, requires enormous amounts of water. In 2025 alone, AI data centers consumed 264 billion gallons of water. That's the annual water usage of 1.8 million Americans, consumed not by homes or farms, but by machines answering questions. They're drinking 550 million gallons per day right now, and the number is accelerating. Here's the part that should make you furious. Since 2022, Nearly two-thirds of all new U.S. data centers have been built in high water stress areas: Arizona, California, Texas. The companies building them chose drought zones to site facilities that drink water like it's infinite. Accelerant 2. The legal cliff. The agreements that govern how the Colorado River water gets divided between 7 states, agreements that have managed scarcity for nearly 2 decades, expire at the end of 2026. The states are deadlocked. They can't agree on how to split a river that already doesn't have enough water to fulfill its existing promises. And the gap between what the river provides and what humans demand is now 4 million acre-feet per year. That's not a rounding error. That's a structural collapse hiding behind a set of expiring contracts. Accelerant 3. The thing nobody wants to say out loud. The Southwest has been in drought for over 20 years. The Colorado River Basin lost 27.8 million acre-feet of groundwater between 2002 and 2024, roughly equal to the entire storage capacity of Lake Mead. That water is gone. It doesn't come back, and the communities built on the assumption that it would be there forever are about to reckon with that math. Here's where the drought becomes your problem, even if you've never lived west of the Mississippi. Think about what happens when a city runs out of water. Not the politics of it, not the policy arguments, just the human behavior. What do people do? They leave. They pack their families into a U-Haul, and they drive toward wherever the water is. And when they leave, when they physically abandon their homes and their communities, they stop making their mortgage payments. Not because they're irresponsible, because they have no choice. You cannot pay a mortgage on a house you can no longer live in. Now here's where it turns into a banking crisis, not just a water crisis. In 2008, when the housing market collapsed, the underlying assets, the houses, still had value. They were mispriced, yes, but you could still sell them, rent them, live in them. Banks could foreclose and recover something. What happens to a house with no water? It's worth nothing. You can't sell it. You can't rent it. You can't give it away. The collateral backing the mortgage, the physical thing the bank thought it owned as security, becomes a liability sitting on worthless land in a waterless desert. And those mortgages aren't just sitting in a local bank. They're packaged into mortgage-backed securities, the same instruments that nearly brought down the global financial system in 2008, and spread through pension funds, investment portfolios, and balance sheets worldwide. The systemic risk threshold, the point at which mortgage delinquencies trigger broader financial contagion, sits around 5% to 10% simultaneous default. In 2008, we hit 11% nationally before the whole thing cracked. Arizona, Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, and Texas alone account for roughly 6 to 8 million active mortgages. Add Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, all currently in historic drought, and you're looking at a potential delinquency pool that approaches or exceeds that threshold. Without California, without the Midwest, just the drought zones. This is Lake Corpus Christi, Texas. It's one of 2 reservoirs that supply water to 500,000 people and one of the largest petrochemical hubs in the United States. It's currently at 9% capacity. The other reservoir, Choke Canyon, is below 8%. The city manager of Corpus Christi stood in front of cameras in March and said, quote, "We have no precedent to follow. There's no manual. There's no video." A former director of the city's water department, a man who has spent 44 years in this industry, said simply, "It's going to be an economic disaster. It's the very worst scenario that I've ever seen." Surrounding towns have already started issuing disaster declarations. Ingleside, Aransas Pass, Three Rivers, Orange Grove, Alice, communities of thousands of people whose only source of water runs through Corpus Christi. One resident, a mother of 3 named Ashley Ortiz, told NPR that the crisis may force her to move. Her words were simple. "One day we might be out of water," she said. I don't want my kids to have to worry about something we shouldn't have to worry about. Ashley Ortiz is not a statistic. She is the beginning of the mortgage abandonment problem. Multiply her by tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, then millions, as this crisis spreads from its current epicenters into every drought zone in the country. And you have your cascade. In 2008, the crisis started with assets that were mispriced, houses that were worth less than the loans against them. In a water collapse scenario, the assets don't just lose value. They become unlendable, unsellable, and uninhabitable. The collateral evaporates, and unlike a financial bubble, which can in theory reflate, you cannot reflate a dried aquifer on a human timescale. The geographic concentration of the risk is actually what makes it more dangerous than 2008, not less. That crisis was spread nationally, which gave the financial system time to absorb it. Slowly, badly, but absorb it. A water-driven collapse would be regionally clustered. The Southwest, the Southeast, Southern Texas, hitting specific banks, specific mortgage pools, specific pension funds all at once, faster than regulators can respond. The FDIC has better tools now than it did in 2008. Dodd-Frank created capital buffers, but those buffers were designed for financial shocks, not for a scenario where the underlying physical collateral of millions of mortgages ceases to have value because the ground it sits on has no water. There is no Basel III framework for the asset is now a desert. So who benefits from this? The Great Lakes region, the Pacific Northwest, if it can hold its snowpack, the Northeast, anywhere with reliable surface water and a stable aquifer. These areas are going to see something economists haven't fully priced in yet: a slow, sustained migration of capital, labor, and people toward water security. Real estate in water-secure regions is going to look very different in 10 years than it does today, not because of a boom, because of a quiet, grinding revaluation of what makes land worth anything at all. What to watch? The Colorado River post-2026 agreements, or the collapse of those negotiations. The Lake Powell hydropower threshold in August, Corpus Christi's Level 1 Water Emergency Declaration, and the mortgage delinquency numbers in Maricopa County, Arizona, the largest mortgage market in the drought zone. If those numbers start moving, you'll know the cascade has begun. The system isn't broken yet, but the cracks are exactly where they were before 2008. The difference is, this time, they're in the ground. If you made it this far, you already understand something most people haven't put together yet. The connection between a dried-up reservoir in Nevada and a mortgage payment in Florida isn't obvious until it is. Share this one, not because it's alarming, because it's true. It's already happening, and the people who understand cascades before they peak are the ones who make better decisions when they arrive. Deception Circuit. See you next time.